My fiancée told me, "You need to find your own life, let's pause this." So I did. When she came back 2 weeks later, I was packing the last box for my move to a new country. Her face dropped. I thought I knew Stephanie completely after 3 years together, but apparently I had become someone she needed a break from. She walked into our Philadelphia apartment that Tuesday evening, still in her Navy marketing coordinator blazer, and delivered the news like she was presenting a quarterly report to reluctant investors. "David, I've been thinking about us, about our dynamic, and I really need you to find your own life for a while. Let's pause this relationship for 2 weeks." I was sitting at my laptop, reviewing system updates for my IT administrator job, when those words hit me like a server crash at 3 a.m., unexpected, jarring, and requiring immediate damage assessment. I had been planning to propose to her next month, had the princess cut ring hidden in my sock drawer, and the whole evening mapped out down to the restaurant reservations. "What do you mean, pause?" I asked, closing my laptop to give her my full attention, though part of my brain was still processing this like a complex debugging session. "I mean, you've become too dependent on our routine," she said, setting down her leather purse with that decisive motion she used when her mind was completely made up. "You always defer to my social plans, my career goals, my timeline for everything. You need to discover who David actually is outside of being my boyfriend." I stared at her, processing this revelation like I would a system architecture problem. She wasn't entirely wrong, and that stung more than if she'd been completely unreasonable. I had gotten comfortable, maybe too comfortable with the path of least resistance. When she wanted to go to her work happy hours with people I barely knew, I went along. When she decided we should save for a bigger apartment instead of that backpacking trip through Europe I'd mentioned 6 months ago, I agreed without argument. When she said we should wait another year before talking engagement because her career was in a crucial growth phase, I'd nodded and bought the ring anyway, thinking I'd eventually change her mind. "So you want me to, what exactly?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Find hobbies? Make new friends? Take up rock climbing? I want you to remember what you actually wanted before us," she said, and for a moment she almost looked sad about it, like she was delivering bad news she didn't want to give. "You used to talk about working abroad, traveling, taking risks with your career. When's the last time you even mentioned any of that?" I couldn't remember, which proved her point more effectively than any argument she could have made. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped bringing up my old dreams because they didn't fit into our carefully planned future. 2 weeks, she continued, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear in that nervous gesture I'd learned to recognize. "I'll stay with Caroline, you stay here, and we'll both figure out who we are as individuals. Then we can decide if we want to build something real together, something that isn't just routine." Part of me wanted to argue, to point out that stable partnerships were built on compromise and shared goals, not constant self-discovery and dramatic pauses. But another part of me, a part I'd apparently buried under 3 years of being the agreeable, supportive boyfriend, was genuinely curious about what I might find if I actually went looking for my own life again. "Okay," I said, surprising both of us with how quickly I agreed. 2 weeks it is." She packed a bag that night, methodically folding clothes while I watched from the doorway, and kissed my forehead like I was her younger brother before heading to her sister's place across town. I sat alone in our apartment for hours afterward, staring at the empty space where her coffee mug usually sat on our dining table, wondering if this pause was the beginning of something better or the end of everything I thought I wanted. The first morning alone, I did what any IT professional does when something doesn't add up. I started investigating. Stephanie had left her laptop on the kitchen counter, and when I moved it to charge mine, the screen lit up showing her email inbox. I wasn't snooping, just glancing, but the subject line, confirmation, romantic weekend getaway, Finger Lakes Resort, caught my attention like a critical system alert. My stomach dropped as I read the booking details. 2 guests, premium lakeside suite, this coming weekend. The reservation was under her name and someone called Oliver Chin. I sat there staring at the screen, my coffee getting cold, trying to process what I was seeing. Oliver Chin. The name felt familiar, and then it clicked, her CrossFit gym. She'd mentioned an Oliver a few times, always in passing, always in group contexts. "Oliver showed us this new workout today," or Oliver thinks I should try competitive CrossFit. I'd never thought much about it because Stephanie talked about everyone from her gym like they were part of some fitness family. But apparently Oliver and she had graduated to romantic weekend getaways while I was being told I needed to find my own life. I could have confronted her immediately, called her sister's house and demanded an explanation. Instead, I did what any good systems administrator does with suspicious activity. I gathered more data. Her Instagram was still logged in on the laptop, and scrolling through her recent activity painted a clear picture. Oliver's comments on her posts had been escalating for months. Looking strong flexed biceps, became, you're incredible, became, can't wait to see you tomorrow red hearts. 3 weeks ago, she'd posted photos from what she called a women's wellness weekend in the Catskills. But diving deeper into the tagged location and cross-referencing with Oliver's profile showed him at the exact same retreat center, same weekend. There were group photos where they were standing suspiciously close, his hand on her lower back in a way that wasn't exactly platonic. I felt strangely calm as I documented everything, taking screenshots like I was building a case file. Maybe it was my analytical nature, or maybe I was just too shocked for anger yet, but I found myself approaching this like a problem to be solved rather than a betrayal to be devastated by. The irony wasn't lost on me. She wanted me to find my own life, and in the process, I discovered she'd already found someone else to share hers with. I spent the rest of that morning doing something I hadn't done in years, researching international job opportunities. Not because I was running away, but because for the first time in a long time, I was thinking about what I actually wanted instead of what fit into our shared plan. I remembered bookmarking a consulting position in New Zealand months ago, something that had excited me before I dismissed it as impractical. Now, sitting in an apartment that suddenly felt like a temporary stopping point rather than a home, impractical seemed like exactly what I needed. The position was still open. Senior IT systems consultant, Auckland-based, with travel throughout the Pacific region. The salary was competitive, they provided relocation assistance, and the job description read like it was written specifically for my skill set. I updated my resume, crafting a cover letter that highlighted my experience while trying not to sound too desperate to escape my current situation. When I hit send on the application, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, genuine excitement about my future. By that afternoon, I had a response requesting a video interview for the following day. Either they were really interested or IT professionals willing to relocate internationally were in shorter supply than I'd thought. I spent the evening preparing, researching the company, practicing answers to technical questions, and for the first time since Stephanie had dropped her bombshell, I wasn't thinking about our relationship at all. I was thinking about what my life might look like on the other side of the world, away from romantic weekend getaways I wasn't invited to and fitness trainers who apparently knew my girlfriend better than I did. The video interview went better than I could have imagined. Within 48 hours, I had a formal job offer sitting in my inbox with a start date 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to completely uproot my life and move to the other side of the planet. Most people would call that insane. I called it perfect timing. I accepted the offer immediately, then sat staring at my laptop screen, realizing I'd just made the biggest decision of my adult life without consulting anyone, especially not the person who'd been making decisions for both of us for the past 3 years. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. The next phase required careful planning. I couldn't just disappear without handling the logistics, but I also wasn't ready to reveal my hand yet. Stephanie was supposed to be finding herself for 2 weeks, which gave me time to organize my exit strategy without interference. I started with the furniture, posting everything online with pickup dates strategically scheduled for when she'd be at work or with Caroline. Our couch sold to a young couple who reminded me of us 2 years ago. The dining table went to a graduate student who paid cash and asked no questions. I kept only what I could ship internationally or fit in suitcases. My best friend Marcus thought I was having some kind of breakdown when I called to see if he wanted our PlayStation and the huge TV we'd bought for football season. Dude, what's going on? Stephanie said you guys were just taking a break, not liquidating your entire life. I gave him the abbreviated version, the pause, the laptop, Oliver, New Zealand. Marcus went quiet for a long moment, then said, "Holy shit, man. She's been planning this for months, hasn't she?" That's exactly what I'd concluded too. The timing was too convenient. The Oliver situation too developed for this to be some spontaneous need for space. She'd been building an exit ramp while I'd been planning a proposal. So what's your plan? Marcus asked. Do you want to confront her? Make her admit it? No, I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. I want to be gone when she gets back. Let her figure out how to explain the empty apartment to Oliver. Marcus volunteered to help with the logistics, and over the next week, we systematically dismantled 3 years of shared life. I visited Stephanie's parents under the pretense of borrowing her dad's drill for some apartment repairs, but really to return family photos and items that belonged to them. I told them I was reorganizing our space, which wasn't technically a lie. Her mom seemed pleased that I was taking initiative around the house. If only she knew what kind of initiative I was actually taking. The hardest part was handling the banking and legal stuff. I transferred my savings to accounts that could handle international transactions, changed my address to a temporary mail forwarding service, and updated my emergency contacts to remove Stephanie from everything. Each administrative task felt like cutting another thread that had woven our lives together. I scheduled the international moving company to collect my remaining boxes the day before Stephanie was supposed to return from her pause. Everything I couldn't sell or donate would be shipped to Auckland, arriving about a week after I did. The apartment would be empty except for her belongings, which I planned to pack neatly in labeled boxes so Caroline could collect them easily. I even researched shipping costs for Stephanie's things, thinking I might arrange for them to be sent wherever she ended up. But then I realized that was still me managing her life for her, and maybe it was time she figured some things out on her own. By the end of week 1, I had my work visa approved, flight booked, and about 80% of our shared possessions either sold, donated, or packed for shipping. The apartment echoed when I walked through it, but instead of feeling sad, I felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's life, someone who'd been sleepwalking for 3 years and was finally waking up. Marcus came over that Friday night with pizza and beer, sitting on the floor since I'd sold our furniture. Any regrets? He asked. I thought about it honestly. I regret that I let myself become someone I don't recognize. I regret that I stopped wanting things for myself. But leaving? No regrets about that. What if she comes back early and wants to work things out? Then she'll find out that some pauses are permanent, I said. Besides, she's probably too busy with her romantic weekend to think about coming back early. On day 12 of our pause, Stephanie texted me for the first time since she'd left. Hey, I need another week to really work through some things. Hope that's okay. This process is harder than I expected. I stared at the message while sitting in what used to be our living room, now containing only a camping chair I'd borrowed from Marcus and a stack of moving boxes. The irony was perfect. She wanted more time just as I was finalizing my escape plan. I typed back, "Take all the time you need," because it was genuinely true. The extra week meant I could handle my departure without rushing, maybe even enjoy my last few days in Philadelphia instead of stress packing everything. Her response came quickly, "Thanks for understanding. I know this is hard on you too, but I really think we'll both be better for this." Better for this. She had no idea how right she was, just not in the way she imagined. That same afternoon, my work visa approval came through via email. I printed it immediately, along with my flight confirmation for Monday morning, Auckland via Los Angeles. Departure at 6:47 a.m. The timing was perfect. Stephanie wouldn't even know I was gone until she decided to end her extended self-discovery vacation. I used the extra time to handle details I'd been rushing through. I wrote thank you notes to friends who'd bought furniture, updated my LinkedIn profile with my new location, and even researched neighborhoods in Auckland where I might want to live. The whole process felt surreal, like I was planning someone else's life, but in the best possible way. I held a small goodbye dinner that Saturday with my closest friends, though I couldn't tell them the real reason for my sudden international career move. I kept it vague, unexpected opportunity, always wanted to work abroad, time felt right for a change. Marcus knew the full story and kept shooting me looks across the table like he couldn't believe I was actually pulling this off. "So when do you start?" asked Jenny, a college friend who'd always said I was too cautious with my career choices. "Monday," I said, which was technically true since my flight was Monday morning. Wow, that's fast. What does Stephanie think about this? The table went quiet. Everyone knew we were on some kind of break, but they didn't know about Oliver or the fact that she'd be coming home to an empty apartment. She's supportive, I said, which would probably be true eventually, once she got over the shock. She encouraged me to think bigger about my career. That part wasn't entirely a lie either. Sunday was devoted to final preparations. I photographed each of Stephanie's belongings as I packed them, creating a detailed inventory so she'd know nothing was missing or damaged. I organized everything by category: clothes, books, kitchen items, decorative stuff, and labeled each box clearly. I even included care instructions for her plants, which I'd been keeping alive during her absence. The apartment looked like a storage facility, with neat stacks of boxes covering most of the floor space. I kept out only what I needed for my final night and Monday morning departure. My 2 suitcases sat by the door, packed with clothes for my first few weeks in New Zealand and the essential items I couldn't risk shipping. My laptop bag contained all my important documents, the job offer letter, and my passport. The engagement ring I'd bought sat in its original box on the kitchen counter next to a letter I'd written explaining everything. I debated whether to include the ring, but ultimately decided she deserved to know how serious my intentions had been before she decided to explore other options. The letter was 2 pages, not angry, not accusatory, just honest. I explained about finding her laptop, about Oliver, about realizing she was right that I needed to find my own life. I thanked her for the push toward independence, even if that wasn't what she'd intended. I told her I hoped she'd be happy with whatever she chose, but that I wouldn't be available as a backup plan. The moving company arrived Monday morning at 5 a.m. to collect my final boxes. I timed it perfectly. They'd be finished and gone before Stephanie typically woke up, even if she had decided to come home early. I did a final walkthrough of the empty apartment, checking that I hadn't forgotten anything important. The place looked bigger without our stuff, cleaner somehow, like it was ready for whatever came next. I called a taxi for 6 a.m., giving myself plenty of time to get to the airport. As I waited with my suitcases in the echoing living room, I felt something I hadn't expected: excitement. Not just relief or vindication, but genuine anticipation for what my life might become. For the first time in years, I had no idea what the next month would look like, let alone the next year, and that uncertainty felt like freedom. At 5:47 a.m. Monday morning, as I was loading my suitcases into the taxi, my phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. "Hey, I'm planning to come home this afternoon to talk things through. I've done a lot of thinking and I'm ready to work on our relationship. Can we have dinner tonight?" I stared at the message while the taxi driver waited patiently, engine running. The timing was almost cosmic in its irony. She'd finally decided she was ready to rebuild what we had, exactly when I was driving away from it forever. I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? "Sorry, I'll be somewhere over the Pacific Ocean by then?" Instead, I put my phone on airplane mode and settled back for the ride to the airport. Let her figure out the empty apartment on her own timeline. The flight to Los Angeles felt like crossing into a different dimension. I'd never traveled internationally alone, never made a major life decision without consulting someone else first, never even quit a job without 2 weeks' notice. Now I was doing all 3 simultaneously, and instead of feeling reckless, I felt more like myself than I had in years. During the layover in LAX, I turned my phone back on to handle some final banking transfers. There were 14 missed calls from Stephanie and a series of increasingly frantic texts. The first few were confused. "Where are you? The apartment is empty. Did we get robbed?" Then angry. "This is insane. You can't just disappear. Call me back immediately." Finally desperate. "Please just tell me you're okay. I'm scared something happened to you." I felt a stab of guilt about that last one. Whatever else she'd done, she didn't deserve to think I'd been in an accident or worse. I sent a single text. "I'm safe. Check the kitchen counter. Everything you need to know is there." Then I boarded my flight to Auckland and turned the phone off again. The 14-hour flight gave me plenty of time to think about what I was doing, to second-guess my dramatic exit, to wonder if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered the booking confirmation for the romantic weekend, the months of planning she'd apparently done while I was planning a proposal, the casual way she'd dismissed my dreams as incompatible with our real future. By the time we started our descent into Auckland, I was certain I'd made the right choice. The new employee orientation at my company was scheduled for Thursday, giving me 3 days to find temporary housing and adjust to the time zone. My new manager, Sarah Mitchell, had recommended a serviced apartment in the city center for my first month, and the company's relocation specialist had handled most of the paperwork remotely. Walking through Auckland for the first time, I was struck by how different everything felt, the architecture, the pace of life, even the way people moved through the streets. It was like stepping into a completely different version of my own life, one where I wasn't defined by a relationship that had been slowly draining my ambition for 3 years. I found a cafe near my temporary apartment and finally turned my phone back on to handle the international service setup. The messages from Stephanie had evolved into something resembling acceptance mixed with fury. She'd obviously found my letter and the ring by now. "I can't believe you did this," one message read. 3 years together and you just disappear like a coward. You couldn't even face me to break up properly." Another one, sent a few hours later, had a different tone. "I read your letter. I know you found out about Oliver. It wasn't what you think it was, and we need to talk about this like adults." The most recent message, from earlier that morning Philadelphia time, was the one that confirmed I'd made the right decision. "Fine, run away to whatever country you think will fix your problems. But don't expect me to be here when you realize you made a mistake and want to come back." The assumption that this was all about her, that I'd eventually come crawling back, that my decision to build a new life was somehow just an elaborate attempt to get her attention, it crystallized everything that had been wrong with our relationship. She literally couldn't conceive of me making a choice that wasn't ultimately about her. I typed a response and deleted it. Typed another one and deleted that too. Finally, I sent something simple. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Stephanie. Take care of yourself." Then I blocked her number and deleted our text history. I had a new job starting in 2 days, a new country to explore, and for the first time in years, a future that belonged entirely to me. 2 days after I'd blocked her number, Stephanie found a way around it. I was settling into my new office in Auckland, meeting my team and trying to figure out the coffee machine, when Caroline called my work line. "David, please don't hang up," she said immediately. "Stephanie is sitting right here and she's absolutely falling apart. She needs to talk to you." I could hear Stephanie in the background, voice thick with tears. "Just 5 minutes, David. Please. I know I messed up everything, but we can fix this. I'll come to New Zealand. I'll quit my job. Whatever you need." Caroline came back on the line. She's been like this for 3 days. She hasn't eaten, hasn't slept. I think she's having some kind of breakdown. She keeps saying she made the biggest mistake of her life. I felt a familiar tug of responsibility, the old instinct to fix Stephanie's problems and manage her emotions. But sitting in my new office, looking out at Auckland Harbor, I realized that wasn't my job anymore. "Caroline, I'm sorry she's going through a hard time, but this isn't something I can fix," I said. "Tell her I hope she finds what she's looking for, but I've moved on." "David, wait." I hung up and asked my new manager about changing my work number. The international distance made it easier to maintain boundaries I'd never been able to set when she was just across town. That weekend, I decided to explore Auckland properly instead of staying in my apartment feeling guilty about Stephanie's breakdown. I drove out to Waiheke Island, took the ferry across the harbor, and spent the afternoon at a vineyard overlooking the ocean. The owner, a British expat named Michael, struck up a conversation when he noticed I was dining alone. "First time in New Zealand?" he asked. "First time doing anything alone, actually," I admitted. "Just moved here for work. Still figuring everything out." Running from something or running to something?" He had that direct way of talking that I was learning was pretty common here. "Both, I think." I told him the abbreviated version long relationship that ended, decided to take a chance on something completely different. Michael nodded knowingly. Did the same thing myself 15 years ago. London divorce, terrible job, felt like I was sleepwalking through my own life. Best decision I ever made. Looking at his vineyard, his obvious contentment, I could see why. That evening, I called Marcus to check in. "Dude, you're like a legend back here," he said. "Everyone's talking about how you just vanished like some kind of international man of mystery. Half the people think you're crazy, the other half think you're a genius. What do you think?" "I think you look happier in your Instagram photos than you have in 2 years," he said. "Also, Stephanie's been calling everyone trying to get your contact information. Jenny told her to leave you alone. Your boss said you'd resigned for personal reasons and wouldn't give her any details." "But what's she doing?" "Word is she and Oliver broke up the day after you left. Apparently he wasn't interested in being anyone's rebound, especially once he realized she was expecting him to help pay for her lifestyle. She's been staying with Caroline and posting these cryptic Instagram stories about second chances and fighting for love." I felt a brief moment of satisfaction, then mostly just relief that I wasn't there to get sucked back into her drama. 3 weeks into my new job, I was assigned to a project that required traveling to Fiji to set up telecommunications infrastructure for a resort chain. The old me would have checked with Stephanie before accepting international travel. The new me packed immediately and spent a week working on tropical beaches between client meetings. I posted exactly one photo, me at sunset with my laptop, captioned simply, "Office today," and got responses from friends back home that ranged from jealous to inspirational. But the real moment of clarity came when I met Emma Rodriguez, an environmental scientist working on coral reef restoration in the same area. She was brilliant, passionate about her work, and when I told her about my sudden career change, she said, "That's incredible. It takes real courage to blow up your entire life when it's not working anymore." "I'm not sure it was courage," I said. "Might have just been spite." "Best decisions are usually a combination of both," she laughed. "Spite gets you moving, courage keeps you going." We spent 3 days working in the same area, sharing meals and talking about everything from marine biology to career transitions to the weirdness of starting over at 28. She was headed back to Auckland the same week I was, and when she suggested we get dinner sometime, I realized I was genuinely excited about someone for the first time since I'd discovered Stephanie's laptop. The night before flying back to Auckland, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Please read this," and I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. It was from Stephanie, written from what looked like a throwaway email account. "David, I know you blocked me everywhere, but I needed you to know that I realize what I did. Oliver was a mistake, a stupid, selfish mistake that cost me the best thing in my life. I've been in therapy trying to understand why I sabotaged us, why I threw away 3 years with someone who loved me for some fantasy about excitement and passion. I know I hurt you in the worst possible way, and I know I have no right to ask for anything, but if there's any part of you that remembers what we had, please consider giving us another chance. I'll move to New Zealand. I'll do whatever it takes. I just need to know if there's hope." I read it twice, sitting on my hotel balcony overlooking the Pacific. A month ago, this email would have devastated me, would have made me question everything I'd done. Now, it just made me sad for both of us. For her, because she was clearly struggling, and for me, because I'd wasted so much time with someone who'd needed to lose me to realize she wanted me. I closed the laptop without responding to Stephanie's email and called Emma instead. We talked for 2 hours about coral bleaching, career changes, and what it meant to build a life you actually wanted instead of one that just looked acceptable from the outside. When she mentioned she was nervous about our dinner date because she hadn't been in a relationship for over a year, I told her that sounded perfect. I was looking forward to remembering what it felt like to be with someone who chose to be there. 6 months later, I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Ponsonby with a view of the harbor, leading a team that was implementing cloud infrastructure across the Pacific region, and dating someone who got genuinely excited when I told her about server optimization strategies. Emma and I had been taking things slowly, building something based on shared interests and mutual respect rather than convenience and routine. She introduced me to rock climbing, I got her interested in photography, and we spent weekends exploring different parts of New Zealand with no agenda except enjoying each other's company. The contrast with my relationship with Stephanie couldn't have been starker. Emma paid for her own meals, had her own career ambitions, and never once suggested I needed to find myself or pause our relationship to figure out who I was outside of being her boyfriend. In fact, she seemed to like exactly who I was, which was a novel experience. That's when the long email arrived from Stephanie. It was 23 paragraphs, sent to my work email since she'd apparently exhausted all other contact methods. She'd found my company's website and crafted what read like a combination confession, apology, and business proposal for why I should give her another chance. The email detailed her therapy sessions, her realization that she'd been using me as emotional and financial security while seeking excitement elsewhere, her understanding that Oliver had been a fantasy that lasted exactly 3 weeks once reality set in. She'd apparently quit her marketing job and was working as a bartender to learn independence and humility. She'd sold her car to pay off credit cards I hadn't even known about. Most telling, she'd researched immigration requirements for New Zealand and claimed to have already started the application process. "I know I destroyed your trust," she wrote, "but I've spent 6 months becoming the person who deserved you in the first place. I'm not asking you to take me back immediately. I'm asking for the chance to prove that I learned from losing the best thing that ever happened to me. I could move to Auckland, get my own place, build my own life there, and maybe slowly earn back your respect. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope for the possibility of it." It was well written, thorough, and probably sincere. It was also 6 months too late. I'd built a new life, not as a reaction to her betrayal, but as a response to discovering who I actually was when I wasn't trying to fit into someone else's vision of our future. I wrote back a brief, kind response. "Stephanie, I appreciate you sharing where you are in your healing process, and I genuinely hope therapy continues to help you build the life you want. I've moved on completely and am very happy in my new situation. I wish you all the best, but please don't contact me again. Take care, David." Then I blocked her work email and asked our IT department to filter any future messages from addresses containing her name. 3 weeks later, Caroline sent me a Facebook message that I almost didn't read. "I know you asked Stephanie not to contact you, but I thought you should know she's doing better. She started dating someone new, a guy from her therapy group who seems really good for her. She finally stopped talking about New Zealand and started talking about building something real here. I think your email helped her accept that chapter was closed. Thanks for being decent about it, even though you didn't have to be." I showed the message to Emma over dinner that night. "How does that make you feel?" she asked, always direct with her questions. "Relieved mostly," I said, "and maybe a little proud of her for figuring it out." No regrets about the dramatic exit? None whatsoever. If I'd stayed and tried to work through it, I'd probably still be there, managing her emotional crises and wondering why I felt so empty. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to leave completely. Emma raised her wine glass. "To dramatic exits that lead to better places." I clinked my glass against hers and looked out at Auckland Harbor, thinking about how different my life looked now compared to a year ago. I had a job that challenged me, a relationship with someone who actually wanted to be in it, and plans for the future that excited rather than exhausted me. I'd bought a camera and been taking weekend photography trips around both islands, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for when my schedule revolved around someone else's priorities. Emma and I were planning a month-long trip through Southeast Asia for the upcoming holidays, and she was already researching coral reefs she wanted to dive while I mapped out technology conferences I could attend in each city. Last month, I got promoted to regional director, which came with a salary increase that let me buy a small house in Grey Lynn with a garden Emma was excited about converting into native plant habitat. We'd been talking about moving in together, not because it was the logical next step or because one of our leases was ending, but because we genuinely wanted to wake up in the same place every morning. The engagement ring I'd bought for Stephanie was long gone, sold to a jewelry store in Auckland during my 2nd month there. But I'd started looking at rings again, this time for someone who'd never made me feel like my love was a burden or my attention was suffocating. Someone who appreciated my tendency to plan ahead and my desire to build something lasting. Someone who, when I told her about my dramatic escape from Philadelphia, said it was the most romantic thing she'd ever heard, not because of the gesture, but because it meant I'd valued myself enough to leave a situation that wasn't working. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your future is walk away from someone who can't see it.